Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So today we'll start with endocrine emergencies. Like we'll start with glucose metabolic derangements, but before that you need to know about pancreas and liver. Okay, this diabetes it's very important, not for your exams, but it's a hot topic. So you should at least know the basics about diabetes. Okay, you guys can hear me, right?
Yes,
Everyone.
sir.
Yes, sir.
If there is any
Yes,
problem,
sir.
just let me know, please.
Okay, sir.
Okay,
Okay.
then let's start. Let's start with pancreas. Okay, what is pancreas? Pancreas is a digestive gland. Okay, it's a digestive gland present inside our body. It has both endocrine as well as exocrine functions. Okay, and what do you mean by endocrine? Endocrine means like which secretes its blood products, like it secretes its products directly into the bloodstream. Like it doesn't have any glands, it doesn't have any ducts. Okay, they directly they directly secrete the secretions into the bloodstream. There are a lot of endocrine glands such as pituitary gland, and there are ovaries and testes and thyroid, adrenaline glands are there. We secrete different type of hormones directly inside the bloodstream. There's no ducts. Other part of pancreas is exocrine, which secretes all the pancreatic enzymes and bicarbonate to neutralize the acidity of the stomach and everything directly inside the to the target organ. They have ducts which lead it to the target organ. For example, pancreas has pancreatic ducts which directly lead it to the duodenum. So when the food is digested in the stomach, it goes into the duodenum. The chyme, which we call as chyme, the crush food inside the stomach when it moves down. It is very acidic because of the acidity of the HCl produced inside the stomach. So, in order to neutralize that acidity, pancreas they secrete bicarbonates and to neutralize the acidity, they secrete certain type of digestive enzymes such as trypsinogen, which are like deactivated enzymes and then they are converted into the activated form, such as trypsinogen. It's a deactivated enzyme. It is converted into trypsin, which breaks down like proteins to amino acids. And chymotrypsin is there, which is converted into chymotrypsinogen. Then there are pancreatic lipases and nucleases and amylases, which break down glucose. A lot of enzymes. Okay, this is the exocrine function of the this pancreas. So, but we are concerned with the endocrine functions. So, if you can imagine pancreas, there are certain type of islands, or which we call as islets of Langerhans. There are clusters of cells which are together, which are called as islets of Langerhans. Just like a kidney has nephrons. Okay, the basic functioning unit of a kidney is nephrons. Just like that, imagine there are islands of Langerhans inside pancreas which have different functions. Okay, both exocrine and endocrine. Okay, let's start with the endocrine functions of the islets of Langerhans. Almost 1 million islets of Langerhans are present in a normal human pancreas. Okay, so these islets of Langerhans they normally consist of four different types of cells. Okay, one is alpha cell, beta cell, delta, and or PP cells or pancreatic polypeptide cells. Before that, you look at the screen, okay, guys. We'll start with this. We'll see this glucose metabolic derangements. It is caused by the dysfunction of the pancreas, obviously, which impairs the body's ability to metabolize glucose. So the basic thing necessary for the metabolism of glucose and other products is insulin. All of you are aware about that. So insulin is only secreted by the beta cells in the pancreas. There is no other production of insulin inside the body other than pancreas. So if there is any dysfunction of the pancreas, it directly affects the glucose metabolism of the body. So most of the glucose derangements in the body they need to compromise to the ABC, okay, airway breathing and circulation, and improper fluid balance. The proper fluid balance is not there. That there is deteriorating mental status and obviously abnormal vital signs and blood glucose levels. Either it can be hypoglycemic or hyperglycemic. We'll talk about it in the later. Okay. So here, digestive gland, it is both endocrine and exocrine. In exocrine part, it secretes bicarbonate to neutralize acidity of the stomach, chyme entering the duodenum, and the pancreatic juices. It contains enzymes such as trypsinogen, chyme trypsinogen, elastases, pancreatic lipase, liver nucleases, and all of that stuff. In the endocrine part, it secretes basic four hormones are there. One is insulin, and one is insulin, other one is glucagon, third one is somatostatin, and pancreatic polypeptide. Okay, you guys can hear me, right? Everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you can understand, or I am going too fast, or what? Is there any problem?
No, sir. It's okay, sir.
Okay, ठीक. I'm moving to the next slide. These are the islets of Langerhans which I was talking about. Okay. See, if this is a close view of an islet of Langerhans. Okay, the middle part, it's the basic endocrine part, which contains the beta cells, the alpha cells, and the delta cells. Okay, so the surrounding parts are the ducts. Okay, these ducts are for the exocrine part, which secrete the enzymes and everything. The middle part is the endocrine part, which secretes the hormones. Okay, pancreas, it secretes enzymes and hormones. Okay, hormones and enzymes are two different things. Okay, so the enzyme part is for digestive part, and this hormone part is for metabolism. Okay, so there are about 1 million islets of Langerhans in the normal pancreas, and there are four types of cells: alpha cells, beta cells, delta, and polypeptide or PP cells. And moving on to the next part is secretions. What are the secretions of the pancreas? What are the secretions? So the first cells which we talk about is alpha cells, which produce the hormone glucagon. Okay, so they produce the hormone glucagon, which increases blood glucose level by stimulating gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis. What is gluconeogenesis? Gluconeogenesis is the formation of glucose. It is a formation of new glucose from non-carbohydrate substrates. Okay, ठीक है? Gluconeogenesis is a like metabolic pathway which results at last in the generation of glucose, but from non-carbohydrate sources. Okay, non-carbohydrate carbon substrates. And glycogenolysis is breakdown of glycogen into glucose inside the liver. Okay. Alpha cells, they produce glucagon, which is responsible for increasing the blood sugar by stimulating the process of gluconeogenesis, which means formation of new glucose from non-carbohydrate substrates, and glycogenolysis, which means breakdown of glycogen. The stored glucose inside the liver is broke down into glucose for energy purpose. Okay. The second cells, which are beta cells, they secrete insulin, which we are all familiar with. So insulin is the basic anabolic hormone of the body. It is the basic anabolic hormone of the body. That means anabolic hormone. That means that anabolism and catabolism, there are two terms. Anabolism means production or making up of new cells or new tissues, and catabolism is breakdown. Okay, so this is an anabolic hormone which like it is responsible for the production of tissues from small particles or amino acids, such as formation of proteins and fats and everything from basic particles such as amino acids and triglycerides. ठीक है? It regulates the metabolism of carbohydrates. Insulin is responsible for the regulation of regulating the metabolism of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins by promoting the absorption of glucose from the blood into liver for skeletal muscles. Okay. So this insulin, what it does is when we have a meal, it's digested inside the stomach, and then it is converted into glucose so as a source of energy to the body cells. Okay, what the insulin does is when we have a meal, there is absorption of glucose from the digestive system inside the blood. So the blood glucose levels in the body, they start to increase. As a response of that, there's a gland inside our body which we talked about, pancreas. Beta cells, they start releasing insulin to counter the rising glucose inside the body. To understand this, we have to understand the basic phenomenon what happens inside a cell. Okay, at a basic plot, what happens there is when a cell needs energy, when we have a meal, for example, the glucose, it travels from the bloodstream to the cell. Okay, so in order to enter the cell, it needs the insulin to enter the cell. That means we can say that the insulin acts as a key to the lock. For example, the cell is a is a is a almira or a case. Okay, so there is a lock on it, which means the receptors, and the insulin, it is the key. So when the key is inserted into the lock, the door will open for the glucose and amino acids and fats to come inside the cell. Okay, so the insulin is very much needed for the glucose utilization by the cell. Cells cannot utilize the glucose
बन रहा
without
है.
insulin. ठीक है? You guys understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, if there's any problem, just let me know. So in these tissues, the absorbed glucose is converted into either glycogen or glycogenolysis. Yeah, I was talking about the glucose. Okay, the glucose, when the insulin is like opens the doors of the cells, the glucose enters inside the cells and it's utilized for the metabolism process of the cells. The remaining glucose, it's either converted into glycogen via glycogenesis, or it's sent to the liver. That means it's converted into glycogen. Like it's stored as glycogen, or it can be converted into fats through a process called lipogenesis, formation of new fats. Or in the case of liver, if it goes to the liver, it both things happen. It's converted into glycogen as well as fats. Okay, and circulating insulin, the remaining insulin left inside the body, it also affects the synthesis of proteins in a wide variety of tissues. Okay, it helps in the formation of proteins from small building blocks which we call as amino acids. So in the process of protein formation, this insulin is very much required. It's an anabolic hormone. That means like the muscular structure of our body is maintained by the normal levels of insulin. Okay, in case of any insulin disarrangement or any glucose disarrangement, the people, they usually tend to either they lose weight or they just gain weight. They won't be in a proper muscular shape. Okay, and insulin is crucial. It's very crucial in several metabolic processes. It promotes the uptake and metabolism of glucose, which I was telling you. It acts as a key to the locks. It opens the doors to the cells, and the cells uptake the glucose for its metabolism. It prevents release of the glucose by the liver. When insulin is present inside the bloodstream, the liver, there is a signal sent to the liver to stop the glycogenolysis or glycogenolysis, like breakdown of the glycogen. It's the process is stopped because of the insulin present inside the bloodstream. It causes muscle cells to take up amino acids, and which I was telling you, like it's an anabolic hormone and the basic components of the protein, and it inhibits the breakdown and release of fats. Okay, so our body's main source is carbohydrates, which are break down into glucose. So in case there is no presence of carbohydrates in the body, our body changes its mechanism and it starts the breakdown of fats. But what this insulin is, it inhibits the breakdown and release of the fats from the body. So the release of insulin from the beta cells can be triggered by growth hormone or somatotropin. Okay, apart from glucose, growth hormone or somatotropin can also trigger the release of insulin from the beta cells. But the most important stimulator of insulin release is glucose, which means that whenever we eat food and there is an increased level of glucose inside the bloodstream, there is a signal sent to the pancreas that the insulin glucose level is rising. It starts, there is a trigger which starts, then the pancreas will start to produce insulin to counteract the rising glucose inside the body. But there are other two factors such as glucagon and somatotropin which can trigger the production of insulin from the pancreas. Okay. So the third type of cells are delta cells which secrete somatostatin, also called as growth hormone, inhibiting hormone, GHIH, and which acts as a regulatory hormone. Okay, regulatory hormone means like in the body there are always regulating things. For example, if the body is starting to secrete insulin, it won't just continuously start producing insulin. Okay, there is a regulating factor. For example, if the blood glucose level is 200 and the insulin it regulates it and it breaks it to 110. After that, if the insulin secretion continues, the patient the, or the person will go into hypoglycemia. The persons, if the pancreas continue producing the insulin, the blood glucose levels will drop very low and the person can go into hypoglycemia. So, and and the other hormone glucagon, if the person's body is having very less glucose, the liver starts releasing glucose by glycogenolysis, by breakdown of glycogen. Okay, so if the liver starts producing continuously glucose from the glycogen, the body glucose levels will be very high. So there should be a factor which will regulate this the secretion of these hormones. So delta cells secrete this regulatory hormone which we call as somatostatin. It inhibits the release of both insulin and glucagon. Okay, and the fourth cells are pancreatic polypeptide cells. These also regulate the pancreatic secretions, but mostly their part is inside the exocrine system, not the endocrine system. They regulate both the endocrine and exocrine part, but their significant action is mostly for the exocrine part. It is a peptide hormone that inhibits pancreatic secretion of fluids, bicarbonate, and enzymes, and also it stimulates the gastric juice secretion. That means it has a part in digestion also. Okay? So these are the four type of cells which secrete different type of hormones inside the bloodstream. Then look at this. If we look at this diagram, let me, yeah. If we look at this, hello, you guys can hear me? Hello. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. See, if you can look at this diagram, uh, when the body is having normal blood glucose, that means less than 100, 110 mg per dl, 70 to 110, we just take it as normal glucose values. So it is in here homeostasis. Homeostasis is the internal environment is balanced. Okay? But in case of low blood glucose, if there is hypoglycemia, if there is low blood glucose, there is a signal sent to the pancreas. Okay, when a signal is sent to the pancreas, the alpha cells in the pancreas they start releasing glucagon into the blood. ठीक है. What this glucagon does, it goes and gives the liver a message to start the conversion of glycogen to glucose. There is a stored amount of sugar or glucose inside the liver in the form of glycogen. So this glucagon, what it does, it goes to the liver and says, see the blood level, glucose levels are very low. So this liver, what it does, it starts converting glycogen into glucose. After that, after the glucose is released from the liver, blood glucose levels rise, and when the blood glucose levels rise, glucagon hormone is produced less. That means it is regulated, which I already told you. The somatostatin, it regulates the production of glucagon so that there is no excess amount of glucose produced. So when the liver gets a signal, it starts producing glucose from glycogen, and in this process, uh, the blood sugar level, it returns to the normal values. Okay, blood glucose levels rise and they come to their normal levels. Okay, and in the second case is when the body is having high blood glucose levels. Okay, this was for the low blood glucose level, and this one is for high. What happens when there is high blood glucose level? The same signal is sent to the pancreas, but this time the beta cells, they get activated and they start releasing insulin inside the blood. Okay, what insulin does is it goes to the muscle cells. Okay, and it starts to open the muscle cells so that they can utilize uh, the glucose. Okay, they start entering the muscle cells, and the glucose is absorbed inside the muscle cells, and the remaining part, it's sent to the liver. Okay, and in the liver it's again converted into glycogen and fats and proteins. There is metabolism, different metabolism going on inside the liver. Okay, so the insulin, what it does, the it increases, like it decreases the blood glucose level by transferring the free glucose from the blood inside the tissues to the muscle cells and other cells, as an which is used as an energy source, and the left out amount is sent to the liver, which converts the glucose to the glycogen, fats, and proteins. And because of this, there is less blood glucose levels inside the body, and then less insulin is produced by the regulatory mechanism, by the somatostatin hormone, which enables the production of this insulin. And and what happens is the body comes back into homeostasis. That means normal blood glucose level. This is a normal mechanism. What happens normally when we eat something, or when the blood sugar levels are high or low. ठीक है? Moving on to the next slide. Now we'll talk about diabetes. Okay, so diabetes, it's a group of complex metabolic disorders. Obviously, it's a complex disorder, and in which we'll talk about these five things which are in your syllabus. One is diabetes mellitus, gestational diabetes, hypoglycemia hypo, and diabetic ketoacidosis, hyperosmolar hypoglycemia. So we'll talk about them one by one. Okay. Uh, hello.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yeah, Asma ma'am, she had already made a slide before. She had made a PPT. What do you prefer? Do you prefer, like, should I give you the same PPT from the book, or you want a different PPT? Hello?
So the PPT from the book will be more better.
Okay, so you can relate to that thing, na?
Yes, sir.
ठीक है, no problem. I'll try to make from the book also. But because
Okay, sir.
this topic is not just for your like exam purpose, it's a very important topic. That's why I just made some slides on my own. So ठीक है, next time will be from the book only. It'll be much easy for you. So starting with diabetes mellitus, okay? So diabetes mellitus, it's a group of metabolic disorders which features high blood glucose levels, which result from defects in the insulin production, insulin action, or both. The effects of diabetes mellitus include long-term damage, dysfunction, and failure. Okay. What I mean by that is, okay, so what happens is diabetes is when there is a, So diabetes type 1, there are two types of diabetes mellitus. One is type 1 diabetes mellitus and type 2. In type
Sir,
1,
your voice
yes.
is breaking. Sir, your voice is breaking.
Okay, let me see. It's because of this. Hello? Is it clear now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It's clear.
Okay. So we'll start with this diabetes mellitus type 1. It results from the pancreas failure to produce enough insulin. So in this case, the pancreas they fail to produce enough insulin, which is usually due to an autoimmune disorder or an idiopathic reason. Like we don't know the exact mechanism why it happens in some people and why it doesn't happen in some people. But if we give a basic explanation, we can say that it's an immune system disorder which destroys the pancreatic beta cells. The cells which produce the insulin inside the body, they are destroyed by an autoimmune disorder. Just like I told you in the allergic anaphylactic reaction, when there is hypersensitivity, there is a lot of production or overproduction of the immune system cells which tend to harm its own cells. Okay, so in this case also, the reason is unknown why the body's own cells start attacking the pancreatic islets of Langerhans, and they destroy these beta cells, and the body is not able to produce the whole insulin after that. So there is the regulation of blood glucose is disrupted. Okay. So this form of diabetes usually strikes children at young age. Basically, it accounts for the younger people, and it accounts for almost 5 to 10% of diabetes. Whereas the other type of diabetes, type 2, it is more prominent in today's age. Like it accounts for almost 90 to 95% of diabetes cases in total. So, the form of diabetes usually strikes children and young adults. Although disease onset can occur at any age, it can occur at any age because the reason for the autoimmune disorder is not known. Till So, it can occur at any age. The body's internal immune system can destroy the pancreatic cells at any age. Okay, so the type 1 diabetes may account for 5 to 10% of all cases. Risk factors. What are the risk factors? What are the factors which can lead to type 1 diabetes? They can include autoimmune diseases. Okay, it can be genetic also, hereditary also. It can be in your family, hereditary also. Like if your father is diabetic, so maybe it can be genetic and you may have diabetic also. And environmental factors, there are different environmental factors which result in this diabetes type 1. So talking about the type 2 diabetes is it accounts for 90 to 95%. It usually begins as insulin resistance. Yeah, in type 1 diabetes, there is no insulin produced at all because of the destruction of the pancreatic cells. So the patient is totally dependent on insulin from the outside. We give injections, and that's all. Like the hypoglycemic agents or the medications, they do properly work for these type 1 diabetes mellitus because they are totally dependent on the insulin. So what happens in type 2 diabetes is there is insulin resistance. There is a production of insulin inside the body, but the cells they don't react properly to the insulin which is produced. Okay, that means that in type 1 diabetes, the locks cannot be opened because the keys, the insulin is not present in type 1 diabetes. But what happens in type 2 diabetes is the insulin, the key is there, the glucose also is there, but the locks they are damaged. The locks to the doors are damaged. That means the receptors to the cells they are damaged, to which the insulin attached and open the cells to uh, so that the glucose can go inside. The locks they are damaged. So what happens is the cells do not use insulin properly. Because they cannot use the insulin properly, the cells are unable to like use the glucose because the glucose doesn't go inside. As the need for insulin rise, as the need for insulin rise, the pancreas gradually loses its ability to produce insulin. See, when our body is when our body needs energy, glucose, it starts like the insulin, it starts moving the glucose inside the cells. Okay, in this case what happens, the locks or the cells or the receptors to the insulin, they are destroyed. So the insulin, it cannot take the glucose inside the cell, but outside the cell, inside the bloodstream, the glucose levels, they are very high. Even the insulin levels, they are very high. But the body, what it does is it keeps on giving signals to the pancreas to secrete more insulin because it needs glucose for energy. It starts giving feedback to the pancreas to secrete more and more insulin. Because of that, the in the blood, both the levels of insulin as well as glucose, they rise up. In diabetes type 1 mellitus, what happens is the glucose levels in the body, they are very high, but the insulin levels in the blood, they are very low because there is no production of insulin. But in case of type 2 diabetes mellitus, what happens is both the insulin levels are high and the glucose levels are high too. So the pancreas, they get overexerted, they get, you can say, tired. They gradually, for a long term, they lose their ability to produce insulin because of overload, because of continuous production of insulin. ठीक है. So these are the distinctions between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is associated with older age. It's mainly like found in the older age people, obese people, the people who are fat, like really fat. What happens is when they have these unwanted fatty substances or they are very high in cholesterol, what happens is when a person is very fatty, the cells inside the body or the receptors, they get covered by the fat, they got blocked, so the insulin cannot bind to the cells and open the doors. And type 2 diabetes is also associated with family history of diabetes if it runs in your family, and the history of gestational diabetes. It's found, it's a temporary diabetes which is found when a female is pregnant at that time. And impaired glucose metabolism, it can also lead to type 2 diabetes. Physical inactivity, if there is no exercise, obviously it will lead you to obesity, to fattiness. Race and ethnicity. In certain type of people, for example, in people in South Africa or those type of people, they have very less chances of diabetes. So it depends. If it's type 2 diabetes, there are risk factors such as race, ethnicity, and physical inactivity. These can lead to this type 2 diabetes. So you can see from the images which which are on the screen. In type 1 diabetes, there is insufficient insulin. Let me show you. Um, just a second. Let me highlight it. Okay. So in type 1 diabetes, there is less production of insulin or diminished insulin. Okay. So the glucose and the insulin is very low, or you can say it's not even there. So in order for the glucose to come inside the cell through this GLUT4 receptors or transporters, there are glucose transporters here. In order to come in, this insulin has to bind with the insulin receptors. In order to for these doors to open and the glucose to come inside the cells, we need insulin or the keys to bind to the receptors or the locks to open these channels. So in type 1 diabetes, insulin is insufficient, so the doors are not open, or the transporters of glucose, they don't open because insulin is absent. So the glucose cannot go inside. So in the blood, the glucose levels rise. They start rising very high. There is hyperglycemia. But it's different in the case of type 2 diabetes, which is insulin resistance. which means the insulin, the glucose, there is a disruption in the pathway where the insulin receptors do not function properly and they cannot open these doors properly. The insulin is there, it binds with the receptors, but the signaling to the like the doors to open, they don't work. The doors they don't open so that the glucose can come inside. There is a disruption in this pathway. But there is insulin present inside the blood. There is glucose also present inside the blood. But there is a problem with the pathway of opening the glucose transporters inside the body. Okay? Okay, let's move on the hello? Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Any
Yes, sir.
confusion till now? Anything you want to ask me?
No, sir.
ठीक है. Should I continue?
Yes, sir.
ठीक है. Tell me when it's too much for you guys. We'll start in the next class. ठीक है?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So let's see the signs and symptoms of what are the main signs and symptoms. I'll explain them later, but just see there is central signs which include polydipsia, polyphagia, lethargy, stupor. Obviously, the patient will be thirsty. Dipsia means increased thirst. Phagia means increased uh, hunger, lethargy. Obviously, there is the glucose cannot go inside the cells of the body, so there is lethargy. The patient will start feeling very weak. There is blurring of vision because the glucose is rising very much inside the blood. This moves inside the small arteries or vessels inside the eye, and it also combines, like mixes up with the fluid which is present inside your eyes, inside the retina. So the fluid inside the eyes it becomes viscous. Viscous means the density, like it becomes thick. So the some people who have long-term diabetes they tend to their vision is very blurred, and breath of the patient will be smelling of acetone. And why does this acetone come? I'll talk about it later because it relates with this diabetic ketoacidosis. We'll have to learn that also. In systemic, there is weight loss. Why does the weight loss happen? See, when there is glucose inside the blood and it cannot be used up, the body it's continuously starts to send signals to the pancreas to start giving insulin and so that there is glucose absorption. But what happens is when there is no glucose absorption inside the body moves to their next source of energy, which is fats. Okay, so the body, when there is for a long time, when the body doesn't get glucose, it starts the breakdown of fats. The breakdown of fats leads to weight loss. Obviously, the patient will lose a lot of weight, and because of the breakdown of fats, as you guys know, the end product of the fat is ketones, ketone bodies. Okay, so ketone bodies are acidic. Okay, so because of the production of ketone bodies inside the blood, the patient goes into acidosis. ठीक है, and because of that ketone bodies there is smell of acetone. There is a fruity smell from the breath of the diabetic patient. ठीक है, in respiration there is small breathing hyperventilation. The patient has abnormal breathing pattern. In gastric there is nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and urinary, polyuria. There is increased urination. Urge for urination is increased. Glycosuria, there is obviously the extra glucose will be excreted through the kidney. The kidneys will try to excrete the excess glucose out. So moving on to complications and symptoms, they go hand by hand, so you'll get to learn about the symptoms also. The major long-term complications are the damaged blood vessels. The blood vessels are very much damaged in a diabetic patient. Okay, they say that the risk for cardiovascular diseases in a diabetic patient is double. And there is peripheral vascular diseases. The periphery, like the vasculature or the veins and arteries in the periphery, hands and legs and all, they get the endothelium of the vessels they get disrupted, and other macrovascular disease. The patient has more chances of stroke. The diabetic patient. Second is the primary complications of diabetes due to damage in small blood vessels include damage to the eyes, kidneys, and lungs. Definitely, when the glucose is too much, it moves to the eyes. It is excreted. The kidneys try to excrete the excess glucose, but they cannot. So it leads to nephropathy. It damages the nerves also, and it leads to neuropathy. So damage to the eyes, also known as diabetic retinopathy, is caused by the damage to the blood vessels in the retina of the eye, and it can gradually result in vision loss and blindness. And damage to the kidneys also, when the kidneys they try to excrete the excess glucose out of the body, ठीक है? They try to overwork, like there is a overload on the kidneys, so gradually the kidneys they also lose their mechanism of excretion also. So it can lead to kidney tissue scarring, it can lead to urine protein loss, and eventually chronic kidney disease, because there is a uh, overload of work on the kidneys. Damage to the nerves of the body is also known as diabetic neuropathy, is the most common complication of the diabetes. The sugar which gets deposited everywhere in the body, it leads to, it disturbs all the mechanisms in the body. Okay? So the symptoms can include, the neuropathy symptoms include numbness, there is tingling sensation, there is pain, and altered pain sensation which can lead to damage to the skin. Diabetes related foot problems. Okay. In a normal patient, when there is a cut, there is healing and the wound is healed up. But in case of diabetes, there is accumulation of excess glucose near the wound site, so there is more chances of infection at the site. Okay. So you can see that the diabetes patients, they have diabetic foot. What happens is the foot, it gets infected. Okay. And when it gets difficult to treat, we have to do in amputation, we have to cut off the infectious leg, because the infection can spread up to the central body from the proximity. And it can go from the leg to the thighs and hips and up. So we have to amputate the leg. And next, we'll have to talk about the pathophysiology of this diabetes, how it happens, and then these mechanisms. I guess.